Good morning, Karen.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. So first of all, I would like to thank everyone for joining in on this digital morning coffee with us today. We have a digital morning coffee at Norge, the first of Friday in every month. And today we have it in English, which we do occasionally, depending on who we have as guests. And today we are very, very lucky to have, and honored, I would say, Karen, to have such an amazing person with us. Karen is a professor at the University of Oslo. She is also a leading expert on climate change, and she's the co-founder of Sea Change. Now, Karen has contributed to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, which was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007. That's amazing. And you've also, Karen, been involved in multiple UN climate reports. And I suppose the list is endless, but we are very, very grateful for having you today and to have this low-key conversation about all the topics. But first of all, before we kick everything off, Karen, I would like to welcome you, our CEO at Norge, Tore Ausland.
Hey everyone, and I will take this in Norwegian, Karen. Det en stor glede å være for oss å ønske Karen og Brian velkommen til vår digitale morgenkaffe I dag. Vi skal snakke om både viktige og alvorlige temaer som angår oss alle. Vår digitale morgenkaffe det startet egentlig som et lite lokalt initiativ som nå har vokst til å bli en nasjonal arena for diskusjon av samfunnsviktige spørsmål, og det vi egentlig veldig fornøyde med. Dagens samtale ingen unntak. So, Eva, Karen, please, the scene is yours.
Tusen takk.
Thank you so much, Tore. And I just want to say that after the conversation, everyone who has joined in today are welcome to ask Karen any questions. So please write your questions in our Q&A section here on Teams. And with that, good morning, Karen. How are you?
Good morning. Yeah, no, I'm good. And thank you so much for inviting me here for coffee this morning.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of things happening in the world. We have a lot of discussions. And I think at this particular time, it was important to step up and have a bigger view on things. And we're very grateful that you join us. But I have a very quick question, and that is, Karen, you're American. And how does it feel being a climate and sustainability professor and looking at what's happening in the US?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's having a profound impact on me and all my friends and colleagues in the United States, but also the whole community that is working on these issues and has been working for so many years, because it's not. I guess it's not surprising, but it's shocking. And It's really like at a time when, like with climate change and biodiversity loss and sustainability issues, we should be moving so much further forward. And now we're going decades backwards. And for me as an American, it's like it's been a real assault on everything that I grew up believing, like this, the Statue of Liberty, give us you're tired, you're poor, you're hungry, your huddled masses. And it's just everything that we care about in terms of equity and inclusion and diversity and things is being flipped. And so it's been challenging, but it's also then, in terms of professionally, it really makes us have to step up and say, like, how do we actually have the biggest impact and how do we confront this challenge right now?
So do you speak a lot to your fellow colleagues in the US about, all the changes going on?
I do. I message them because a lot of them are have positions of like deans in universities, and they're really struggling. They're in meetings all the time. They're trying to kind of reorganize, and people working on climate change and biodiversity loss, a lot of their funding is disappearing. So it's been, I think that it helps them to know that there's that they have people that are cheering them on from outside the US. And I think that's where, the research has to continue.
I just read this list of banned words, and I just want to read some of the words. Obviously the list is endless, but it's the DII, the diversity, equality, and inclusion, along with many other climate initiatives. It's absolutely being slaughtered in the US. And I just want to read a few words that the new administration has banned from the government-funded research, and this is mind-blowing. You are not allowed in any way to use the word women, female, females, gender identity, gender equality, gender justice. You're not allowed to use the word Black, Latino communities, ethnicity, race, people of color. You're not allowed to use the words LGBTQ, sexual orientation, transgender, reproductive health, abortion. And the list just goes on and on. Disability, diversity, equality, inclusion. And on top of it, the top of the cherry, you're not allowed to use in any shape or form any word with climate or environment. I mean, what? What are the consequences of not being allowed in government-funded research in the US to use these words?
Yeah, no, it's astounding, and I think like words matter. They are what holds it's the glue that holds society together, our shared meaning. And when you erase and delete so many concepts, it really is. It is a very authoritarian tactic to quiet people. And I think that what we have to do is to still stand for those and express them in different ways. I have one friend was giving a talk right when the list came out, and she says, well, I will have to use poetry. And I'm thinking that, the same essence, like we can loan English the Norwegian words, rettferdighet, mangfold, inkludering, and everything, in the same way that when I was in Wisconsin, everyone talked about lutefisk and 17. Mai. We just have people, I think we just need to find other ways to say the same thing, but really keep the conversation on exactly the essence of those. And I just spent 4 years working on the Naturpanel's assessment of it's transformative change assessment, gjennomgripende endring. And those words are the principles of transformative change. So equity and justice and pluralism and inclusion and respectful and reciprocal human nature relationships. That is the essence of the transformations to a just and sustainable world that we need. And we see then that there is no principles, there are no values that are being supported. So I think it's really important for all of us to hold those regardless. And that takes courage, and but it's really important at this time. And I think Norway can play a really big role in this.
Yeah, the consequences or I suppose the mindset, the very short-term mindset that has led to this is connected very deeply to profits, business and profits. That typical business mindset. I just want to ask you, what is the very purpose of an economy?
Yeah, well, I think that, I think people interpret it in different ways, but many think that economy is about efficiency and resource distribution and things, but also that it is about it's about the well-being of society and how it is to support our collective well-being. And I think that that's where, if we stop looking at economy as separate from society and separate from the environment, but see them as embedded and interdependent dependent on each other, then we really see that, how do we create an economy that actually serves both people and the planet. And I think that's where we're where we actually need to be going right now, rapidly.
Yeah. So do you think that there's another word? We are used to the word ROI, return on investments, but there's also a social return on investments now. Why is that important, do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think that, the social people are our most valuable resources. They are the solutions to all of our problems. We create technologies, we use technologies, we abuse technologies. We have so much, there's so much potential in our own creativity to actually imagine different futures and actually enact different futures. So the social return on investment is exactly about that. How do we create well-being for people? And right now we see that we're not, and I think a lot of young people are feeling very hopeless. A lot of my students feel that they were born at the wrong time, that they came, they're like, we missed the boat. You had it so good before, and they feel that they're just inheriting, just problem after problem. And I think that social return on investment really can lift everybody to think that, like, well, how do we collectively work together to solve these issues? And to me, that's that is the biggest return on investment we can imagine, is to invest in like the people and the planet.
Do you think it's possible to have any sustainable economy without thinking about the environment, without thinking about the social environment?
Well, I think that like environment and society together, we have to see them. And that is where like our whole understanding of human nature relationships has really been that nature is something separate from us. And we've dominated nature, we've extracted, we've exploited and everything. And what we're seeing, like, in this assessment, about more than half of our gross domestic product or global domestic product comes from nature or from sectors that are medium to highly dependent on nature. So we need nature, we need pollination, we need insect, we need a healthy environment to have a healthy economy. And it needs to be inclusive, because we can't have a world that works for some and not others, because there are no borders when it comes to nature.
Yeah, so we have to embrace nature in order to be profitable as well.
Yeah,
so
and take care of it.
I think that the challenge is, when we speak to, or when we talk about the word sustainability, it's a massive word. It basically includes everything. And my experience is that people have a tendency to not really quite understand the word, because it just involves so many aspects of our lives. So what is your take on, when you speak to your students, to the leaders all around the world, how do you explain to them what sustainability is, as it is for a community or for an individual? What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, sustainability and sustainable development have been very controversial from the beginning, because sustainable, what are we sustaining? And my favorite definition comes from a geographer, John Robinson, who says that it's a conversation, a collective conversation about the future that we want together on this planet. And I personally, when I talk about it, I like to think more not just sustainability, but thrivability. How do we create a world where we can collectively thrive? And many people are saying, well, we're beyond sustainability. We actually have to work on regenerative sustainability, like actually bringing back what we've lost already. And so that's also, there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm for regenerative approaches to agriculture, to every economic sector. And that's where I think like to give life to sustainability is to really bring this like thriving and like the transformative potential out. And I think that's where a lot of my emphasis is going now, is like, how do we scale transformative change?
So when you are out talking to people, what's the message that you convey to them in terms of what can an individual do that actually has an impact on the whole?
Yeah, well, that's my message that I really am passionate about, is that you matter more than you think, because the individual is the collective. We are always part of a whole. We have so many spheres of influence, and we're always creating ripple effects. And that's where the language we use, and you can see that with what's going on in the US now. It does have ripple effects negatively around the world. It sends messages and things. But when we have some, and you can think of like if Norway, for example, takes a stand and does this, it is really like a superpower, that it can actually influence so many others and say, yes, we want to be more like Norway and not like the US or things. So it's that we matter more than we think. I think that every little action actually can contribute to transformative change. So we have to move away from thinking of like incremental versus like large scale and small scale, and think about how are we all changing patterns.
Yeah, but do you think that Norway, and with our oil wealth, do you think that we are incompatible with being a climate leader?
I think there's some irony, and then I think that facing that irony, because many, like that is where we're at right now. But also to think, okay, well, we have wealth from oil and resources and things like that, and what do we do with it? What do we invest in? How do we invest in a future that is sustainable, or where we can all thrive? And that means then making different decisions, and that it's there are obviously trade-offs and things. But I always think, because as a geographer, I look back at like geography books from the late 1900s, when oil was just being discovered, and they didn't actually know what to do with it in the beginning, and there were very maybe just a couple hundred potential uses. Now there are thousands, and if you look at the future uses of hydrocarbons, you can actually separate or people are doing this now, separating the hydrogen and carbon, creating plasmas that can be used for renewable energies and materials. So there's it is a valuable resource, but not for burning. And that, I think, is something that, we could use our imagination and creativity and really invest in solutions that will lead the world into the green future that we need.
Yeah, so it is possible for us to become a climate leader, despite having so much oil resources.
Yeah, I think that we have the wealth from the oil, and now we actually have to think about, like, what is it, and then how do we develop renewable technologies, alternative materials, and different ways of actually organizing our economies and societies, thinking in terms of global sustainability. And that, I think, if we take the science seriously about potential tipping points and the so-called planetary boundaries and things, then it's not actually optional, because our future development and economic growth really will depend on what is the baseline that we have in our how can we take care of the planet and have the planet take care of us, and that's reciprocal, so gjensidige relations with the planet.
So our brains, we are wired to think very short term and instant gratification, which is why change always is difficult as well. And so how do we rewire our brain to stop thinking just short-term profits or short-term gains? Because when we look at means to become sustainable in every aspect of life, we also have to include the long-term consequences. How do you speak to people when you try and rewire their brains into thinking that it's not just short-term instant gratification that works? You need to change your pattern in how you behave.
Yeah, and I think that is really it's a great question, because we take it for granted that this is the way we are, but we've actually been wired for this. And if you look at indigenous cultures that are thinking, 7 generations, 3 behind, 1 now, and 3 ahead, and many of them are actually always thinking long term. They're thinking, how does this affect the whole? So it is really for us to start to ask different questions about that. Rather than saying, I'm going to rewire your brain and you rewire mine, or something like that. But how do we actually get that reflexivity to start to think, so that the future isn't just way off in the future, but the future is right here. What we're doing now makes a difference for that future. And I think what I've learned from living in Norway for a while is that, like, we will be remembered. When I go to my in-laws' farm, they remember the generations before and what they did and how they were. And I think that's to think of ourselves in this much longer historical thing and a much bigger perspective is it's very powerful and empowering when we start to think that we are part of this a much bigger picture.
Yeah. And do you think that we could utilize our collective power, all these small bits that we have in Norway, and the passion and the engagement? Do you think that we could be a superpower against what's happening all around the world in terms of the slaughtering of the values and human rights and these initiatives?
Absolutely. And that's why I think, like we get, there's a myth that, oh, we're too small, or, like that
Yeah.
the myth of the small, that little doesn't make a difference, but it really does, because it is actually creating an example. And that means that we have to take risks, but we also have to support the risk takers. And, and I think that like as a collective, that we can actually show that this is possible. And we need to show other examples, like from Iceland, from other, countries where people are actually emphasizing equity and justice and inclusion and diversity, including biodiversity, and really coming up with different ways to relate to nature and relate to each other and relate to the future. So as you said, like this superpower is in us, and I think that's why I feel very privileged to be in Norway, and takknemlig that it's but because I think that it is the time now for for like the great examples to show up.
But so for businesses, do you think it's possible to drive long-term profits without including the climate and the social sustainability part of it?
I think that the future is going to depend on sustainability and social sustainability, because again, we need people, we need healthy people, we need a healthy planet in order to thrive. And so, what is the purpose of just, striving for like wins that are when you don't have a society to actually like take care of each other and the planet. So for me, it's a very like it's to see it all together in a more that environment and society and economy go together is, and I think it's going to be very clear to us, because where we're at right now, we are in the decade that matters, and what we do now is going to decide the future. And there's a huge difference between 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees and 3 degrees and 4 degrees of warming on the planet. And if we don't have nature, if we don't have the diversity of ecosystem services and how nature contributes to us, then we're going to be in for a shock that is probably similar to the shock that I'm feeling now with what's going on in the United States.
Yeah, well, I can't even imagine how you might feel. I'm thinking we've seen that the EU's omnibus proposal. It's a new proposal. How do you think that would impact the existing sustainability reporting?
Yeah, I think
and why did it come in the first place?
Well, I think that we're seeing it again comes from the ripple effects of what's going on in the United States and the uncertainty in the economy. And I think just in the last week, we've seen so many things with tariffs, coming and going, and like there's a lot of economic uncertainty now. And so anything that's adding a cost to business then becomes, like the collateral damage of the Trump policies and everything. And I think we see that, or the risk of that, with sustainability reporting, because it's, like what we measure is what we move. And when we can actually make visible what we're not looking at, it's really powerful, because then it's not just about reporting our, like the impacts and how we're affecting the environment, but it's about changing it. And so we need to know what we're doing in order to change it. And so my fear is that that we will start to put a lot less attention into environment and sustainability at the expense of saying, like, oh, we need more defense, more this, rather than thinking in terms of holistically. It's like, how do we create security on this planet? And that has to become, sustainability is part of that equation.
We have a tendency to have this very short-term focus, as you just mentioned as well. Obviously, defense is a very important issue. Before we start the Q&A session, what type of advice would you give everyone who's listening in on how we can continue to protect ourselves by our own individual initiatives?
Yeah, and I think that really to think about, how can I and we have the biggest impact right now and stay healthy, because I think that is where, and that's one reason I know for myself, for my students, that like it's very easy to get overwhelmed by by everything that's going on and to burn out. And so how do we actually, keep going? And yeah, I'm very much aware and working on that. But then to really recognize that no matter what we're working on, that it is having an impact on the whole, and to start to talk together and have these conversations with people of like, well, how do we actually, work on transformative change, and that's why I think that the timing of our assessment, which was approved by over 140 countries, there is a lot of initiative and engagement with transformative change for a just and sustainable world. So how do we be part of that is the question. I think everyone is part of it, and so how do you increase your impact and do it in a way that we can where we can thrive.
Yeah, I think these conversations that we have, Karen, I absolutely love them. It's you have so much insight and knowledge, and it just I, for my case, feel very inspired by everything that you say, and I love discussing with you. So thank you very much for So thank you very much for joining this morning. We have quite a few questions, so I'm wondering, Anna.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a few questions from the Q&A session, please?
Yes. People can please just ask questions, and then we would love to answer, or Karen would love to answer them. So feel free to do that now. We have actually one question here in the Q&A so far, and it's Peter Mollat. He's asking, is it true that EU is skipping the demands on sustainability reporting?
I guess, Eva, you could answer that in the omnibus bill. I think that there have been lowering the bar and making it easier in terms of the size of the companies that need to report. And I think Tore or Eva, you can also ask on that. But I think the risk is that the EU, a lot of the most progressive and promising initiatives and rules for the green transition and things will go take a back seat to other priorities. And so instead of seeing things as competing for priority, we need to think about how do we do these together. So Eva, I don't know what you think.
Well, it's an interesting question. I think I think lowering the bar, if you may, lowering not the standards, but making it easier to actually start the reporting process might be a benefit. But then again, it's a setback as well. So I don't know. It's a challenging time that we live in, and especially having all these threats now from the US and the rhetoric that we see, it affects every single aspect of the established initiatives anyway. But yeah, it's I don't know. It's interesting. We'll see what's happening. Yeah.
I can give a quick comment on omnibus, because for now it's a draft, but it's most likely to go through, I think, and the draft defines that companies with more than 1,000 employees and more than 450 million euro in turnover must report under the CSRD. But you still have these reporting requirements. They will apply on their supply chains and so on. So yeah, there will be most definitely change, I think, but how it will turn out in the end, we will see.
And how can businesses balance the short term and short-term investments and the long-term sustainability investments, sustainable investments, and how can they balance this so that they don't suddenly get bankrupt, but that it's a balance, but still they want to make a change in a way and they want to contribute?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I told her you can probably answer as well. But I think it really is like to not start always think in terms of short term and long term, but think of like, what are we doing right now? How is this affecting our reputation? How are we affecting the environment? You know, how are our short term interests and long term interests connected? And that is, you know, because we can't be pushing sustainability off into the future as if, and because we get to this idea that, you know, it's like the politics of never getting there, but we need to actually, our short-term investments have to be sustainable. And again, going to the science and what we know is that we have very few years. The 2030 agenda, we're 5 years away from that. And so it is that we need to be working short-term and long-term at the same time.
Yeah. And you work with students, so you see what type of companies they would like to choose. And do you think then to have a good like sustainability reporting system in your business, do you think they will get a better reputation? And do you think that young people that want to apply for jobs, that they look at that?
I think so, more and more. And what I hear, including from my children, one who's working in the IT sector and things, is that there's like people want to be in integrity, they want to be like proud of what they're doing. And they know especially students today, they've grown up knowing what the consequences are. And they also see what we're doing and what we're not doing. So it sends a powerful message. So I think that to align with the future labor force, and that goes into like where will people be wanting to to put their energy. And so I think that the more we can create the jobs that are both meaningful and exciting and give a social return on investment, I think the more thriving we will be as Norway and also as a world.
I heard you mention the planetary boundaries. Would you like to share very short a bit about that? Because I don't know if a lot of people know so much about the planetary boundaries and how we're doing now compared to just 10 years ago or 5 years ago. And I think it's very interesting. And would you share a bit about it and how we can make a change actually and the companies can make a change?
Yeah. The planetary boundaries is it's kind of a way of thinking about environmental issues that a number of scientists developed in about like 2009, and showing that like climate change, biodiversity, like nitrogen and phosphorus cycles and water and land use and the ozone hole, all of these, like that there's bound, like we can do so much and then we can exceed these boundaries, and that puts us in danger. And we've already gone over the boundaries for a number of these, including climate change and biodiversity and nitrogen cycles and things. So, but at the same time, we've recognized too that there are social boundaries too, that we need equity and justice and voice and gender and energy and things. So how do we actually bring the social, like a safe operating space for humanity, as it's called, with the planetary boundaries? So it really is a call for us to be aware that we're always contributing to these large scale changes. And to me, as working on transformations, it shows that we actually can influence large-scale systems as well. Small changes add up to large changes for the negative and for the positive. And I think we are underestimating our collective capacity for social change when we don't think about how we can, collectively, how individually and collectively we are contributing to the safe and just operating space for humanity.
And then we have a long question here. Bjørn Lomborg, visiting professor at the Hoover Institution of Stanford, said in an interview that Europe is alone in its sustainability policy and is putting billions in policy with no return and therefore losing jobs and companies moving out of Europe. Innovation is the key, a smarter sustainability policy. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, I followed Bjørn Lomborg for a long time, for first in climate denial and then saying that, warming is better and then that we need geoengineering and things. And I think like that bottom line is that like Europe stands alone. Like sometimes when you lead, you are the first ones, and I think if there's anything that this world needs right now, it is someone to be taking the lead and saying that this can be done and that this is, and then others can join in, and that is how social change happens. But if nobody takes the lead and is willing to stand alone, and that is something that I think, where we started the conversation with the situation in the U.S., it's like we need to support the people who are speaking up. There's people who are daring to do things differently and who are working strategically for both, like the short term and long term to be combined. So I think that, Bjørn Lomborg's analyses are always very, I interpret them as very like fluid and but also not very not very strategically in the big picture.
And another one, how do we convince decision makers that sustainability is actually profitable and not just a means of compliance and documentation?
This goes into how change happens. And I think convincing is a very hard thing to do, but showing is easy. So if we actually show results and we actually show that like this actually is working, here is a really good case. Here's a group doing this. Here's a, like that is so much more powerful because, it gives them a story to look at. It gives something to, but trying to convince without having any results to back it up, it's hard to be taken seriously. So I would really encourage let's show the results and show why this matters.
And do you have any examples of organizations or companies that have turned their sustainability responsibility as a business advantage and not just extra cost?
Well, I guess the icon is like Patagonia that has, made the earth a shareholder and everything. But I think there's many other ones too that are really trying to think, how do we do things in a different way? And probably people in the audience can say, we're doing this or we're doing this. And I think that the point is that we do need the good examples and not to say that, Patagonia is exceptional, but that it is actually replicable at all scale, like that for other sectors.
Yeah, I think actually Puma as well are quite ahead of this. With they started with the sustainability, like they had kind of two budgets in a way, and they looked at one budget that was the money and the economy, and then the other one was the sustainability one. And I think that's very interesting as well. And then we have some praise for you as well. Or Torunn, she says, I'm very much inspired by your work and Monica Sharma's work on individual agency. How would you advise us to approach our own daily work life, looking for opportunities to make an impact?
Oh, that's a great question. And I worked very closely on transformative leadership with Monica Sharma, who is she led leadership and capacity development at the United Nations and wrote an article on personal to planetary transformations that really inspired me 15 years ago to engage with, how do we do this? And it is like that, going back to that every conversation that we have, everything that we do can actually, shift systems, and that we're really like, what we're talking about in terms of systems is relationships, and we can always change those relationships. So the conversation we're having today might, I will be inspired to, I'm going to look at Puma, or, we remember those stories, we remember those things, and we can work strategically. It's not just about having hope for the future, but it's about taking action. And Monica's always rather than, being overwhelmed, it's like what actions when we're in action, aligned with our values, and that goes into the what we started with too, like how do we bring equity, inclusion, diversity, all the transformative principles into action, and so there is mattering in the moment. Everyone can go off after the coffee and really think about how can I have an impact today, and do not underestimate those small every small thing that we do. Yeah.
Oh, I agree, and I think a lot of people, when we talk about what EU proposes and that we are alone, and with the sustainability, I think sometimes we focus so much on the climate part. But I think, and I think you agree, that it's just as important to look at the financial, economic part and also the social part. And I think that's also what we see in the list of banned words. It's a lot of social problems with that list, you know. So I think that's something that's very important. Also, that I think we can make a change in that way as well. Don't you agree?
Yeah, very much. And in the transformative change assessment, we identified 5 strategies and actions for meeting transformative change. And the transforming economic and financial systems was one of them. And it is really important. And it doesn't mean like what we're seeing now is really like a slaughter of everything, once then transformation doesn't mean changing everything, but it means very strategically working to shift what's not working. And we need to do that. We need to transform governance systems. We need to shift like our views and values collectively of what we're prioritizing and why. And a lot of that goes into then education. It goes into the cultural narratives and the stories that we're telling ourselves and each other. And that goes, again, what you were saying, Eva, with the long-term, short-term, like that we're creating this kind of idea that we're short-term people. But I think that we can actually tell ourselves a different story and act that story.
I think that was a fantastic way to close off the Q&As. Karen, thank you so much for taking the time to enlighten us with all your knowledge, with all your insights. We've been so excited to have you here, and you are such an inspiration to so many people. And so I just want to, on behalf of everyone at Nekia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for a wonderful start to a Friday. It was always a pleasure to talk to you, and and I look forward to our future conversations.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karen. So with that, everyone, I would like to remember everyone to join our next Digital Morning Coffee, which is the first of every month, first Friday of every month. And before we close off for today, we would like to have a small talk with Tore, who has some wise words for us. Tore?
Compared to Karen's, I don't think that will be so wise, but thank you very much, Karen. It's make you think a little bit, being pushing for profit basically all my life, and, growing up to be a adult recently, and kids and grandkids, you actually start to think how for tomorrow, how they will, inherit our world, so to say. So I will go in Norwegian. Bare en sånn kort annonsering på vegne av klyngemedlemmene våre og for så vidt dagens deltakere. Tusen takk, Karen. Så vil jeg bare informere om at vi har framforhandlet en spennende avtale med et lokalt deep tech-selskap som har en spennende AI-datadreven bærekraftsløsning, rapporteringsløsning. Den vil vi informere mer om etter møtet i dag. Så da sier jeg bare over til deg igjen, Eva, og så kan vi wrap up. Takk.
Tusen takk, Tore. And again, Karen, thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to speaking to you later on. And with that, I wish everyone a great Friday. I wish you well and a happy weekend. And I hope that you take Karen's wise words and wisdom and get inspired when you leave the Teams meeting. So thank you very much for joining, and we look forward to seeing you at next Digitale Morgenkaffe.
Bye-bye.
God helg.
Thank you, Karen. Have a good weekend. Bye.